I look back at those journal entries now, and they kind of are a little haunting, not gonna lie, because I look at that and I see someone who was hurting so much, who was really was forced to address the parts of themselves that they could no longer hide. You can befriend the skeletons in your closet, and that is how you're going to live the life you want to live. Because as long as you have skeletons in your closet that you're trying to avoid, that you're trying to hide from, because you're in fear that God's going to punish you to hell if you even try and interact with them, or you fear what could potentially happen, that is going to keep you constantly running away from your problems. Maybe God actually created me the way that I am, and would want me to love all parts of myself, so that way then I can love all parts of other people unconditionally. Because it is very hard. It is very hard to truly love other people unconditionally when you don't know how to give yourself unconditional love. All right, y'all. Welcome to In the Stars podcast, hosted by, well, yours truly. Oh my goodness. We have a gnarly Pisces full moon tomorrow at 15 degrees of Pisces. Oh my goodness. That's actually inspiring how I am shaping this episode, because this full moon is not only directly impacting me, it is also directly impacting a lot of people who I know, a lot of people in my circles, a lot of people who I figure listen to the podcast. You know, I was tuning into the energy of kind of the collective who listens to this podcast. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do something I don't normally do. Yes, I have a guest. I have Maverick, Joyce on the podcast. I have guests very frequently, but usually I reserve the whole podcast for a guest. But today I'm going to do something a little different. We're actually going to add in an additional segment. So in addition to the word of the week, which I forgot to put in last week, my apologies, I also am adding in something, which is actually my coming out story. Because this Pisces full moon is illuminating the parts of ourselves that we may have put on the back burner. Things that we may have wanted to avoid because we don't want to face that part of ourselves. For maybe it's social cultural traditions, maybe it's the way we were brought up, maybe it was something that is self-imposed. Whatever it is, maybe it's all of it. Or maybe it's just something that we're just too busy. Like, we're very busy people. We just fill our lives with so much busyness, we forget to look at those parts of ourselves, you know? Whatever it is, you know, that's the kind of stuff that's being illuminated this full moon. And maybe it's not even part of yourself that's being illuminated. Maybe it's like you have that household appliance that's just, or that drain, that clogged drain that just needs to be unclogged, and now you're actually going to have to unclog it with this full moon. You know, it could also manifest physically in that way. You know, there's so many different ways that this energy can manifest, but for the most part, it's going to be the themes of illuminating the things that we have put to the side, the things that we have maybe avoided, the things that maybe we intentionally didn't even want to look at. So regardless, that's going to be the theme of this full moon. So I'm going to share my coming out story, because that is actually case in point. You know, the theme of coming out, you know, it's something that, you know, a lot of people try and push away because, you know, maybe they don't like that part of themselves, or maybe they were brought up in such a way where they just don't want to even look at it or address it. And so I thought that that would be very fitting for this woman. And I think that when I tuned into the energy of the club, I'm like, you know what, I think y'all could really benefit from that story, because I've never actually shared it online. Because believe it or not, yes, I podcast, yes, I do a lot of social media stuff. That's only like maybe 2%. I only share like maybe 2%, not even that probably, of who I am, what I do. I'm actually a very private person. And sometimes the most private people are the people who are out in public all the time. It could also be the opposite. You know, sometimes the quietest people that you're ever gonna meet, the people who maybe don't have social media, maybe the people who aren't really as active in social life or whatever, you know, those kinds of people might also be the people who are screaming the loudest, you know, to Scorpio Mercury. That's kind of the truth. And that's like with everything too. Like the things that, you know, often get overlooked are the things that a Scorpio Mercury will often be like, As you can see, I have a Scorpio Mercury. But anyhow, so with that being said, I'm going to share that story, and then we're going to get into the conversation that I had with a therapist, Maverick, Joyce, actually, who is actually approaching therapy a little bit differently than the way that is most commonly seen in modern-day psychology circles, which actually kind of has people constantly living in their past and kind of re-traumatizing themselves in the process. And Maverick actually approaches therapy differently. They actually go into therapy as being like, yes, the past happened. We're going to acknowledge that. This affected you this way. That's why you're here. But there's no need to relive it. There's no need to walk us through every little last detail over and over and over again to try and dissect every little part of it so that way we can move on. Actually, we move on by learning from our past and by being able to make active decisions to live the best life that we want to live, whatever success is for us. And that is revolutionary. And that is what me and Maverick talk about. So I have lots of really neat concepts and topics that we discuss. And yeah, before we get into the interview with Maverick, I'm going to share that my coming out story and the word of the week, which, by the way, I did forget to put in the podcast last week. I apologize. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get straight into it. See what I did there. Ha ha ha. I'm so cool, so funny. All right, so I mention this a lot, like whether it be through articles I write or podcast episodes or just, little things that I put out there. I actually grew up originally Methodist. I was baptized Methodist, and then I actually baptized on Pentecost, 2006. I don't know. That's kind of a cool little story, if you know what Pentecost is, fantastic for you. If not, don't worry about it too much. So I had grown up Methodist really up until around 5th grade. And then I also then had like a little period where I experimented with some non-denominational churches, and then a little bit of Southern Baptist, which very evangelical, and then also kind of went back to more chill Christian environments, and I was actually Presbyterian from around 6th grade to around when I was a senior in high school. So there was a lot of moving around. I did not just grow up in one church. I grew up in 7 churches. That was just a fact of the matter. But I was okay with that because I really loved new experiences. I loved learning about religion. I loved learning about spirituality. And, in my head, I was like, well, the more churches, the better. So there you go. What better way to do it? But I wasn't really brought up with the idea that spirits are bad, that demons are real, and that, heaven versus hell. I wasn't really brought up that way because the Methodists don't really focus on that too much. Methodists are very practical. They're, honestly, if you were to ask me, I think a little too practical because they don't really acknowledge a lot of the areas of spirituality that I feel like should be addressed, because I had those questions and they weren't being really discussed in the Methodist Church. That no one really just talked about. It was just kind of an off-top. It was kind of just a kind of a taboo subject. You know what I'm saying? So that was something that I really didn't. That's why I didn't really listen to the messages that much when I was at the Methodist Church. But I was so spiritually aligned with the music, the organ, the singing the hymns, listening to the choir, all that kind of stuff was what really got me spiritually motivated. Venus, my Mercury sextile my Venus, classic music, slay, that kind of stuff. So that was kind of where I felt most spiritually connected, was through music. And I would go home, I was learning the piano, all of those things. I would play out of those books. And still do, not gonna lie, because they're good stuff. It's good stuff. Even though if I don't believe 100% of everything of it, I can still recognize when work is good. I don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But anyhow, so I had grown up that way, and then I obviously, non-denominational to Southern Baptist, very big switch. That was when I really started listening to the messages of the church, because I was like, well, this is the first time that spirits and demons are actually being talked about in church, and this is interesting, because these were the kinds of things that I would read about in the school library. And I was also very fascinated with Harry Potter when I was in elementary school, and even really up until middle school, really. I mean, it's a good series, even though J.K. Rowling might be an asshole, you can still also recognize when a series is good. So I had really grown up that way. I never really grew up with spirits are bad, demons are bad. And even when I was, my little stint at this Southern Baptist church. It wasn't really I wasn't around there enough to really hear spirits are bad, demons are bad. I just knew they existed, and they acknowledged that they existed, and therefore I was like, oh, finally, somebody somewhere is talking about this. And so I had started listening to them, and that's when I started getting into prophecy, rapture theology, and then before you know it, I was an Indisneer person in 6th grade, believe it or not, because I would actually start tuning in and really doing a lot of looking into it online, which, I was in 6th grade, didn't really know my reputable sources yet. I would just listen to a whole bunch of apologists and take it as fact. And that's how I became an Indisneer person in 6th grade. And that's also how I developed really conservative Christian beliefs. It only took me like 6 months. That was how easy it was, because I don't know, kind of see where I'm saying, that's kind of how I got that conservative Christian ideology. Now, here's the part where things get interesting. So in 7th grade, that was when I had started journaling. That was when I started writing notes. That was when I started really documenting things that happened every day. And I do that even to this day. I never really stopped. I'm just more consistent now. But I was kind of going through and I was looking back, and I'm like, so in 7th grade, that was when I got my first girlfriend, and I was reading about the way that I would speak about girls or having girlfriends, because all of my friends were girls, and I thought I was straight. But also, I did have some friends that were guys, and then I also would allegedly, or at least I thought I liked girls, or I wanted to think that I liked girls. I already had a whole bunch of really good friendships with girls, and so the friendships I would write about as a normal friendship, right? But when it would come to having a crush, I would write about this in a very toxic masculine way, and it was really bizarre. I might actually share one of those journal entries in the Starseek Astrology Patreon, just because I think it's fascinating how I wrote about this, because this was not a genuine crush, or genuine crushes, plural. These were, I was trying to force something to happen, and I had viewed girls or having a girlfriend as some prize that I could achieve, solve all my problems. It was really bizarre. There was no, I actually care for the person. There was none of that. It was literally just some sort of object that I was trying to get. Now, obviously, that I'm very out, very proud, very, in tune with myself, it wasn't easy getting there. But I look back and I'm like, that was not a crush. That was projection. And it showed, because I had a girlfriend, lasted about a week, and then I had another girlfriend, lasted about 2 weeks, and I had another girlfriend, lasted about 3 weeks, and then that was really about it. And that was in middle school. I didn't actually start considering the idea that I might be gay, or actually the words that I quote used was bisexual, because as much as, a lot of people are like, oh, I come out as this and blah, that was that. It was just a snap moment. No, I had to come out in phases, because my religious beliefs were so ingrained into me. And I felt like that if I were to show myself differently, because I was doing everything right. Allegedly, I was going to church every Sunday. I had a lot of friends. I was a straight A student, that if I were to be seen in any other way, that I would be either, I could go to hell, I could do, it was a lot. It was a lot of pressure. And so therefore I had to it wasn't just a one and done, automatically when I come out, everything's healed, everything's cured, blah, blah, blah. It wasn't really like that. It was a process. I came out originally as bisexual because I didn't want to think of myself as completely gay. I then had to backtrack that throughout 2020 and realize, oh wait, actually, no, I am actually very, very gay, not really an ounce of straightness in my body. And then there is even some moments in that time where I had to even deconstruct from a lot of religious beliefs that I had. And that was very, very interesting to see in that process. So that kind of just goes to show, life throws you in many different directions, But every single part of yourself that you try to hide you will not be able to run away from forever. So I was also going through some very interesting transits in 2020 when I had come out, because I had actually come out, I originally started considering for the first time that I might not be straight on, I think it was around the third week of February of 2020. So like right before everything closed down in Arkansas. And then I had officially like came out to myself as bisexual. I actually finally addressed it, that there was this guy that I liked, and I had finally began to start realizing that, okay, that's actually there. That's actually something that I cannot run away from anymore. And that transit was the Jupiter-Saturn-Pluto conjunction on my Venus in Capricorn. Yep, that'll do it to you. But that also is why it took me so long. It took me probably about a year. No, maybe not that long. It took me about, I would say about 9 months. 8-9 months to really fully accept that was a part of myself that existed. Because I would try and fool myself even when I did come out that I was bisexual. Because there was part of me that wanted to cling on to the notion of being straight, because I felt like being straight was like the way to go. You know, whatever. Something like that. And so there was a lot of elements of things like that didn't just change overnight. And it also forced me to really look back at my religious beliefs. Even though I was Presbyterian at the time, I literally got confirmed in the Presbyterian church literally the day after I came out. And that's actually a fact, because I look back at my journal entries. And that is something that was also very bizarre to me, because Presbyterians are very openly affirming of LGBTQ+, right? They're very openly affirming to that. Why was I still struggling with this? Well, it was because I still had this internalized homophobia from beliefs that I had developed over time that I did not deconstruct from, that I did not think or question even. Maybe that is a load of crap. You know, maybe that's actually something that's keeping me back. Maybe that's not actually how God works. Maybe God actually created me the way that I am, and would want me to love all parts of myself, so that way then I can love all parts of other people unconditionally. Because it is very hard. It is very hard to truly love other people unconditionally when you don't know how to give yourself unconditional love. And that was what I had to experience in 2020. In addition to obviously the COVID lockdowns and things that were quite unprecedented, but you know, that all just happened at the same time. And I look back at those journal entries now, and they kind of are a little haunting, not gonna lie, because I look at that and I see someone who was hurting so much, who was really was forced to address the parts of themselves that they could no longer hide. And part of being a Capricorn Venus, you know, because I am a Capricorn Venus, is that we are very focused on how other people see us. In fact, when we are operating in our egos, we find ourselves trying to really... Okay, how do I explain this? We find ourselves really trying to get external validation. So, like, we try and do everything right because we need to be seen as, like, either the best or either, you know, blah, 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 you know, things of that nature. Or we need to be seen as competent. And I was trying to do everything right, textbook everything right. I was a straight A student. I was going to church every Sunday. I had some friends. I was doing extracurricular activities. I was in beta club. I was doing all of these things. And having to come out and actually address that side of myself that I refused to even, like, look at. I didn't even want to touch it. It was so bad at times where I even kind of resented other gay people, which is how I can usually sniff out a homophobe, and I can be like, that's projection, real fast, because I was once there, baby girl. I was once there. It wasn't fun. Don't get me wrong, it was not fun. You could not pay me to go back into that time. But it did teach me very valuable experiences and very valuable skills and tools that I use today. And my life is so much better because I acknowledge that that was my past and that I can learn from it, and that it wasn't just a waste of time, that it wasn't just something that is ruling me and hanging over my head now. I befriended the skeletons in the closet, quite literally. I had to learn that I was not going to hell because of the way God made me. And I know some of you are like, well, but everyone has temptation. Yes. I am very tempted to eat a whole bag of Reese's. Maybe eating a whole bag of Reese's is probably not good for me. I don't think God is sitting here on a throne damning people to hell because of who they love. Because I can tell you, when I would start writing about people who, or guys who I would actually start crushing on, and like, I'm talking about like actually crushing on, that was true care for other people. That was not trying to obtain a prize. That was not trying to force things to happen. It was truly, I cared about the individual. And there were even parts of myself that's like, well, look, here's the thing. Even if they're straight, or even if they're not, maybe the relationship wouldn't work out, whatever it is, I was okay with that because I knew that at the end of the day, I cared that the other person was okay. And that is what a true crush would sound like. Not some prize, not something you can parade around, not something you can say, oh, look, here, I'm straight, I'm with a girlfriend. You know, that is a true crush. Now, I will also say I didn't share all of the gory details of my coming out story. There were a lot of very specific dates and events that happened and things that I'm not going to cover, mainly just because this is a podcast. It's only an hour show. It is a podcast, and I just, like I said before, there are still some things that I feel like are so personal to the point where I just don't really feel like it's necessary to share. But the overarching theme is that you can befriend the skeletons in your closet, and that is how you're going to live the life you want to live. Because as long as you have skeletons in your closet that you're trying to avoid, that you're trying to hide from, because you're in fear that God's going to punish you to hell if you even try and interact with them, or you fear what other people are going to think if you interact with them, or you fear what could potentially happen, that is going to keep you constantly running away from your problems. And that is going to make you one of the most miserable people, okay? You need to recognize that transformation is truly a beautiful thing. You just gotta let it happen. Don't judge yourself for it. You're beautiful just the way you are. You are perfectly imperfect, as I would say too. The fact that you're imperfect makes you perfect. Because if you were truly perfect, why are you here? You know, why are you on earth? What's the point of life? It is my hope that with the Pisces full moon that we have coming up, that you're able to recognize an area of your life, or maybe I don't know, maybe even something in the physical world, like maybe it's that clogged drain. You know, I keep being drawn to the clogged drain. Maybe somebody listening has a clogged drain and they're finally needing to go in and clean it. Whatever it is. Those kinds of things are being forced to be addressed. And hopefully my story will help you realize maybe that clogged drain isn't just a pain in your butt. Maybe it's an opportunity to have a new experience. Never thought a clogged drain would be so beautiful, but You know, I think about it. It can be. It very well can be. I freaking hate clogged drains. I freaking hate it because cleaning them up is ugh, nasty. Nasty, I tell you. But you can turn it into an experience. And that's exactly what I did this, couple weeks ago. I had a clogged bathroom tub. You can find beauty in those kinds of moments, even if how nasty they may be. Literally befriend the skeletons in your closet. I know that was a weird connection there, but, that's kind of what it is. That's kind of what's going on here. So, that being said, let's go ahead and get straight into the interview with Maverick. It's a great conversation. Okay, so our word of the week is transit. And transits are the current energy or the energy of a specific time, which is where the planets currently are or where they are at a specific date that we are looking at. So you always have your natal chart, right? Like, no matter what you do, where you go, even beyond your death, your natal chart still is you in this lifetime in this form, okay? Transiting energy is always flowing, it's always moving. It's never going to be static like your natal chart is, okay? So you can adapt transits to a natal chart to see, how is the energy of the world, or that's currently going on in the world right now, how is that affecting you? And how can you adapt to it? How can you rise to the occasion to meet that energy and get the best possible results from it? Are you going to sit down like a bum on a log and just let it happen to you? Or are you actually going to take action and try and work with it to build the life that you want to live? That's the power of transits. If you have any more questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, weirdness, I would love to hear them. Comment on some of my social media posts, or you can go into Patreon too. That's actually the easiest way because it's like texting. You can go into the chats if you have a question and literally just ask me anything, and I get a little notification and I can just respond to you right then and there. Spotify comments are great, but I don't get notifications for them like I do for Patreon chats. So definitely recommend that as the best form of communication. If you have any questions, I will be talking about transits a whole lot more in the Patreon as well. So definitely go over there and join if that is something you are interested in. Welcome to the show. This is your first time.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for
Yeah.
having me.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I always love bringing guests on the podcast. It's so much
Yeah.
fun because it helps people be able to see different perspectives on astrology or just religion, spirituality, or life in general. Because we have a lot of people who tune into the podcast, primarily people in Gen Z, and I have a big Gen X crowd actually. I actually have quite a bit Gen X's.
Nice. Is
Um,
that all your parents?
yeah, I do have a lot of
Your friends'
people
parents.
who tune, like faculty members or just people who I have also met in other astrology circles, and that's just kind of how I get that demographic. So I wanted to bring you on because you are someone who we met in different astrology circles, and I really appreciated a lot of the work that you have been doing, and because I followed you on social media, and we really connected pretty much on the spot. And I wanted to bring you on
Mhm.
because you take therapy and also an approach to life that is truly revolutionary. That's something that
Mhm.
I haven't personally been seen done before. Not saying that
Yeah.
a lot of the tools and the mechanisms that you use haven't already existed, but you really brought them to an awareness and you really added your own flair to it that really connected. And so maybe tell us a little about what you do, how you got there, and kind of what the purpose that you see in what you do. Like, where do you find your calling in that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, my calling is solidly in decolonizing and collective liberation. And so that means a lot of different things for me. My like kind of role and strengths and how I see me playing my part is as a visionary, as a healing artist, really with the emphasis on art there because healing has been so divorced from the artistry that it is because of um, these systems of settler colonialism that we have, like when we talk about patriarchy, when we talk about racism, they all stem through the structure of what this USA, the country we call the USA, was founded on, which is settler colonialism. So I really look at settler colonialism as the root of like all these oppressive systems that we talk about. And when I was kind of going back and looking at how this country was formed, and I was going through like my own dark night of the soul, like I realized that this country was formed by weaponizing trauma, basically. And so it just kind of was one of those things where it just started to intuitively emerge for me that like this path of like therapist and really innovating therapy was going to be my calling. And so I've been a therapist now, and a pre-licensed therapist, and I've been working for 2 years, but it's like my clinical experience doesn't really reflect my level of expertise, because before I even went to school, I had studied for years just from different indigenous knowledge systems, listening to indigenous voices, especially Black women. Like Black feminism is a huge part of like my perspective, my work, and how I see the world. So I took all of this like studies with me, and also just experience with people. And I just have really great listening skills and like pattern recognition. Autistic, it's just like that's how I got my pattern recognition. And it just really became apparent that like a therapist, healer, to revolutionize, like you said, and really innovate the therapy field was the way to go. And one of the really big influences on the way I practice was actually Dr. Eve Tuck, she's co-written Decolonization is Not a Metaphor. She's written many other works, is a professor, done so much in the world. And there was this open letter that she wrote about damage-based research. And in colonial Western societies, everything is based on damage. And therapy is the same way. And she talked about approaching things from a desire-based framework. And of course, I was learning about her about the same time. I was learning from Lori, and Lori's emphasis on Venus, rehabilitating your Venus desire. I was just like, oh, and I just started seeing, and then I'm reading Audre Lorde, and she's talking about the importance of Eros and desire, and how that's been corrupted by patriarchy. How it's so much more than just what the church says. Sexual feelings or whatever. No, desire is actually your soul's intent. And there's a lot of also spiritual lineages that talk about that too that we can get into. But yeah, so it's so what I do is I put the psyche, which is soul, back into psychotherapy. I don't pathologize people. I don't call them damaged, disordered. I look at people when I'm working at that with them as where is your alignment point? Where's your soul? What's your soul's intent? What would that be like to be in alignment with that? And where are you out of where are you out of harmony? Where are you out of balance? Where are you in imbalance and disharmony? And what can we do to put you back into alignment? And I do that through a lot of intuitive guidance, somatic therapies, and just my own skills, like I said, with the pattern recognition and communication. But I also just recently got trained in accelerated resolution therapy, so I'm really excited about that because it is a modality that is desire-based. So you don't have to relive your trauma and relive your trauma and relive your trauma. You it's like being walked through a dream. And using metaphor and imagery, the therapist guides you through erasing the negative images associated with your trauma and your pain, and you replace them and you positize the memories. And so it's really it's like being in a dream, and you're processing out your trauma and your sensations and all of the nervous system activation. You're processing it all out as you go through this. And it oftentimes only takes one session. For really complex trauma, it can take up to 5 or 6. But it's a really pretty short-term focused modality that really focuses again on like on that desire of what would I have rather had happen, you know? What
Yeah.
can healing look like?
That's one thing I wanted to discuss as well, is that the reason why I think I really just like absolutely just fell straight into the work that you did or that you do is because you're not one of those modern day therapists who are always like the trauma, the trauma, the trauma, trauma everything. Let's talk about, let's go through because that's kind of a very insensitive approach when I would think about it. I'm like, that's kind of like barging through something that may not exactly be ready to express fully just yet, you know,
Yeah,
because a lot of times trauma runs very deep and we all have it whether we want to admit it or not. And let's just say it's completely impossible to say that you are a 100% completely healed person. I know
yeah, it's
people
a
who
journey.
yeah, I have heard people who say that they are, and most of the time, it's one of those things that if you have to say that you're an 100% completely healed person, you're probably not, because nobody
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Well, and it was really my work with young people, because I'm an elder millennial, and I really started off seeing like college age students, you know, like people born in like 2004, 2005, 2006. Like that was kind of where I started. And when I went into my own private practice, I continued to see young people, like I would say mid 20s, so a little bit older, mid 20s to early 30s, like kind of that pre, post, and during Saturn return phase. Like I think it's my Saturn in the fifth house. I just do really well with Saturn return folks.
I
But
mean, I have Saturn in the fifth.
yeah, so how do you do with like Saturnian processes? Like I find I do
Well,
really well
yeah.
with them.
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
mean, for me, Saturn in the fifth, well, it's right on my fifth house cusp, so it's a little bit like I kind of wish it wasn't there at times because it makes it very, very hard for me to relax because I always feel like I need to do something. But I don't know. When it comes to just Saturnian processes, you know, it does allow a little bit more of a it's very dramatic, but it's very but it just kind of flows a little bit because it's also in Leo for me. So I have a Leo
Oh,
Saturn, so
okay.
there's that as well.
Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mine's in Scorpio, it's square my sun, so it's kind of like I really feel that inertia and like that like struggle between like energy flow.
Yeah, see,
But I
mine is square my
also
Mars.
okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So do you find like stopping and starting things is kind of like
It's more like sustained
momentum?
energy, but I have a hard time picking my battles. It's very, very difficult for me to
Okay, I
step
see
down
that.
from a losing battle and or even recognize that a battle is losing anyway. So
I was gonna
it makes it
say.
very hard to do that. And it makes it very a little dramatic. So
Yeah, 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 yeah. That tracks. And to contextualize this too, like while I was doing this work, I was learning about astrology and I was studying with Lori, and so I was understanding like working with people in this larger context of the world, like, hey, we're headed for a massive systemic change. And I could see, like, even if I wasn't like studying astrology and learning from Lori, like you could see the systemic change like starting with young people. Like it was really obvious, like when they were talking about their college experiences and just like the they just described like systems that were totally like old, outdated, not serving them, not being listened to, and there was a lot of actual like really, really, really strong insight from the youth that they just discredited themselves and because like they had been raised to gaslight themselves, you know, like so many of y'all are raised to gaslight yourself, dismiss your experiences, not think you have any expertise, but the truth is that you have all grown up during massive systemic change and transformation, and there is a skill set in that cultivates from lived experience. There's a skill set and there's a wisdom that comes from that. There's actually the energy that we need to carry us forward into the future. And so that's when I really started to revolutionize and innovate the way I did therapy and move away from damage based frameworks, which is basically it's accepting insurance, so I can't accept insurance, but um, it allows me to actually practice decolonial therapy and not have to pathologize people and call them broken. And like there's a collusion that happens with that energy. Like you can feel the energetic presence of insurance and damage and colonialism, like when you're in the therapeutic space with someone and you're accepting insurance, and it really triangulates the care. It absolutely triangulates the care and adds a power dynamic that isn't necessary at all, that and complicates the healing relationship.
Oh, absolutely. And you brought up a very good point that you aren't someone that really focuses on the damage that's done. You're more about what that damage, how you, or with the damage that's been done, what can you do to reconstruct, reevaluate, and redesign to turn and transform?
Yep.
And so you're more about the transformation process. And that is
Yes.
something that I think is not seen hardly much at all in a lot of the modern day therapy spaces. In fact, I was just having a conversation with a professor of mine the other day. So I was having a conversation with her, and she was saying that a lot of people who tend to be more high achieving,
Yep.
who,
High functioning, we
4.0
call it. Yeah.
right, 4.0
Yeah.
GPA, all of that, that they tend to be, or most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time tend to be the most depressed or anxious or or like mentally unwell individuals at times. And I was like, okay, that's actually a really interesting observation because I've kind of observed that too. It's even especially in myself as well because I was somebody who before college, I want to be very clear. I was that 4.0 GPA student. And then when college hit, that was when I was like, you know what? No one gives a you know what about my GPA other than scholarship. So, there we go.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
kind of
Let it
I just
go.
kind of let that one go. But I recognize that a lot of people and through the conversations that I've had, they're like, but 4.0 is it's the title, it's the prestige. I'm like, but is it though? Is it
Hmm.
though? What are you getting out of it? Do you want something on paper validating you?
Yeah.
Or can you validate yourself and know that you can stand by your own expertise or your education or your experiences and know that just by having them and being who you are in and of itself is the most valuable thing that no credential, that no number, that nothing can ever amount to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is something that is a struggle because that's kind of why I say high achieving in quotes because um, I actually had a very interesting comment on a article that I had posted, and someone was like, "Look, at the end of the day, GPA is just a number. It's not reflective of who you are. It's how well you played the
Yeah.
system because a
Yep.
POS piece of shit with a 4.0 can still is still a piece of shit
Yeah.
and may
Yeah.
not
It's
be a functioning
academic
member of society."
performance. It's not
Exactly.
learning, it's
And
academic
so
performance.
that was something that was very eye-opening for me because it was something that I kind of already knew, but I didn't actually realize how prevalent and how
Mm.
everywhere it is,
Yeah.
especially in university. And I was curious I wanted to ask you kind of along those lines, why do you think that that is the case as like from a therapist point of view?
So many different ways. One is just your nervous system has been trained and programmed to chase external validation, and you've never been taught how to internally validate yourself. Our whole entire our society is structured this way. We have compliance-based schooling. We don't have actual learning and education happening because actual learning and education happens relationally. It doesn't happen by like memorizing facts and spitting it out on tests and meeting certain standards. Like schools train you for academic performance. They train you for performativity, and those who are good at performativity pass on. They don't treat you. They don't um, teach you how to learn through relationship. So, they're not, in relational learning, you learn things like kindness and grace and compassion and repair and all these things. And then, like, interspersed in that, like, through that relational structure, you're also, you're learning, like, okay, this is how you do math, this is how you do science. But the relationship comes first because kids are so bright, they can learn anything. Literally can learn anything. The problem is that we get so, like, obsessed with like trying to get them to learn things in a certain amount of times and meet these metrics and bars and standards because that's what funding is linked to. Like there's just all these colonial like pause in the process, and it's a very politicized process. And then there's the other component, which is lots of times like perfectionism is a colonial mindset. Like I call them, instead of cognitive distortions, I call them internalized colonial distortions. So like if you were to talk to a CBT therapist, they call that a cognitive distortion, like perfectionism. But it's actually an internalized colonial distortion because our systems want you to try and be perfect, because then you will burn out, you will burn yourself out, you will exploit yourself, you do everything you need, again, to get that external validation, that reward for self-worth, because you've been taught to seek rewards by your education. They have used tools of positive reinforcement to get you to do that. And some of this too is, if you look back through your ancestry, you might see like immigrants who came over in the early 1900s or late 1800s and were at a very like, have you ever had a time when we weren't xenophobic in the USA? But like, it was a very xenophobic time, and there was this real push to get white ethnic or European ethnic immigrants who weren't considered white at the time, Italians, Irish, German, to assimilate into Anglo-Saxon European culture, which is how whiteness was born. And so, perfection was one of those survival mechanisms. So there's also this part of this inherited ancestral string too that you can look at. And when you start looking at all these different strings and you start feeling like, okay, this is where this is in my body, this is where this is in my body, and you start to tune to your breath. And I find like when I go through guided visualizations with people and meditations with people, like things start to emerge, knowings start to emerge, they start to connect to like their intuition or their guides, and like things start to shift and move, basically.
Have you ever heard of The Body Keeps the Score?
Yeah, I haven't read it, but yeah, I've heard of it. And actually, I've been meaning to ask Lori about that because she said that that work was someone else that she had worked with had actually like done the work first, and then I think he died or something, and then the person who wrote The Body Keeps Score like kind of took that material. I don't know. I need to get like that whole story, but like there's
Yeah.
more there. Yeah.
Yeah, so I had to read actually for a class of mine. I had to read, I guess it was an excerpt of it. And that's kind of what this reminded me of is
Yeah.
that um our body keeps track of everything. And so,
Yeah.
while our brains may be like trying to go, 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 tunnel vision, block everything out that doesn't fit in the pathway that we want to be,
Yeah.
our body's like, we're running our bodies down. It's like a car that is on a constant commute. At some point, it still needs gas. At some point, it needs its oil change. At some point, it's just going to not work anymore because you have
Yeah.
put 300,000 miles on that thing. So, it's important to recognize that yes, our bodies do indeed keep it score. Even how woo woo or taboo that may sound, because I know that's like something that not a lot of people have ever thought about. That is something that I have actually truly found to be, in my experience, something that is very valid. Like, I
Yeah.
recognize that a lot of times, maybe it wasn't that I was actually getting viruses all the time. Maybe it was actually because I hold all of my anxiety in my gut, and therefore, whenever I have flare ups, that is
Yeah.
what gets hit first. So maybe I didn't get the stomach virus 6 times in 2 months, you know? And so it's kind of being able to recognize how your body is keeping score. Where is it that you're feeling it? Sometimes you may feel it physically. Sometimes, almost all the time, you'll probably feel it physically somewhere. But sometimes it might be more of a mindset thing. Like sometimes, like we may
Yep.
visualize that whenever we are whenever there was something that happened or something, like we visualize that part of our body or something. So it may not have a direct correlation, but it can be mental as well, and both are extremely valid because both mental and physical traits of ours are still part of our realities that we experience,
Yeah. They
even if it may not make
intersect
sense to
too.
somebody else.
Yeah. 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 And they intersect too. Like I don't really think, I don't believe that you can treat like just mental and not physical or just physical and not mental.
They're
And
interrelated.
that's, yeah, and spiritual too. Like everything is in there. Gosh, there's a, one of my favorite books is called Decolonizing Trauma Work by Dr. Renee Linklater. And she's an Indigenous woman who is a professor in Canada, I believe. But it's just a really powerful book, like really reframing the way we look at trauma. And one of the things that she quoted in there, and I can't remember what paper this was from, but it was an older paper, and it was talking about how um, every like illness has a spiritual component, and you need to be in dialogue with like the spiritual part of the illness too. So that's something I always kind of keep in my mind when I'm supporting people. Because sometimes people will be like, like I have depression, and oh man, I have so much pain, and I'm like, okay, well, let's. The
You
thing
know,
is that people don't always, they think they're separate, because we're trained to think they're separate, like our physical and our like mental health, and so a lot of people like don't necessarily look at chronic illness or chronic pain as being connected to their mental health in that way. Like they kind of think like, oh, my mental health is bad because of these things. Where sometimes, I mean, lots of times I found it's that like a person doesn't feel they have a sense of agency or autonomy. They're making a part of them smell small, and that's often like where I find that intersection of chronic pain and depression come up.
okay, so you brought up a very interesting point that I think might get a lot of people thinking. So you were saying that there was a thinker that you were researching and that you have come across on your path that also said that there was a spiritual component to any sort of trauma or any sort of regenerative process. What do you mean by spiritual, and what would you say to people who might consider themselves as atheists or people who are or may think that they don't really have spirituality at all or relate to that?
Yeah, so I really have always liked Doctora Gloria Anzaldua's definition of spirituality, which is, and I highly recommend her book, Luz and Oscuro, Light in the Dark. It's like the guide that we all need for these times through transformation. But in her book, she talked about spirituality as like this expanding your awareness, expanding your perception to attain like this grand perception and understanding of the interconnectedness of things. And really, in all of my studies and experiences, and what I feel to be true is that spirituality is really about the interconnectedness of everything, like how we are interconnected to the trees. The trees are interconnected to other trees, and we're interconnected to each other. Like in our environments and like every place we go into, it's about like that interconnectedness. And certainly, like if you start getting down like the quantum physics rabbit hole, like you start seeing that like actually like being proven in science. So that is how I think about spirituality. I experience it in a very like feeling, sensing kind of way, because I'm just a clairsentient. So that's how I experience it. An atheist, they might just experience it in more of that like intellectual mental way. And that's okay. That can still be spirituality. It's just that like your molecules aren't actually so separate from the molecules around you.
Yeah, I actually really like that approach to spirituality because that's the kind of the approach that I've also thought about it. Because before I even did astrology, okay, this is just kind of a Eli's life journey. Um, so I was a very, 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 very well churched child.
Okay.
I didn't actually decide to part ways from the church until actually 2023, 2024. It was around that winter. So it was actually relatively recently. But I didn't part ways from the church for good. In fact, I still do a lot of activities. Like I still explore churches around. I mean, you can go back and look at the archives
Yeah.
and episodes that I've done where I've explored different communities, and that kind of stuff really lights me up because I really like to see how people get into
Yeah.
community and experience spirituality together.
Yeah.
But I did not realize until I got into astrology that religion and spirituality are two very different things because
Oh
I used
yeah.
to just use them simultaneously. I was like,
Yeah.
oh, religion, spiritual, same
Hmm.
difference. No, they're actually seen
Yeah.
in very different areas of a chart because religion is more so a cultural, a normative approach to spirituality. Yeah, spirituality is part of religion, but it isn't spirituality completely. Spirituality is your individual connection to everything. It
Yep.
doesn't have to be a god, it doesn't have to be goddesses, it doesn't have to be deities, it doesn't have to be some archangels and all of these cyclops. It doesn't have to do all of those mystical. I mean, if that's your jam, that's your jam. If that's how you view it, that's how you view it.
Yeah.
It's more so how you connect with everything. Where does the boundaries that you separate yourself from everything dissolve? And how do
Yeah.
you express that? So, for me, I had to let go in order to expand my spirituality. I had to let go of the boundaries that I needed to be a part of a religious community.
Yeah.
I can still partake in religious practices because cultural and also like there's certain there's a ritual thing behind it that something that I personally find to be extremely spiritual, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's 100% spiritual because it's more of a vehicle that helps get you to where
Yeah.
your understanding of a complete understanding of spirituality is. And so I don't think that religion should be competing against spirituality by any means. In fact, I think it's just your vehicle. It's just how you approach it.
Yep.
Now, that brings me to something that you actually said that I think was magnificent. That spirituality is the interconnectedness of everything, the trees, how they all are connected, through the air, through the molecules, through the roots, through the dirt, through the earth. And so are we. So kind of dive deeper into how you kind of came to that approach of spirituality versus maybe one that was just told to you that you just needed to accept as
Oh my
reality or else
goodness.
God was going to punish you for
Yeah.
eternal damnation.
Oh my goodness. That's a long story, Eli. I only have so much time. So I did start off being raised Catholic, Roman Catholic, and I went to like Sunday school, until I was like 16. I got um, what's that word again? Confirmed. I can't remember the
Affirmed, yeah.
sacraments. Yeah, I got confirmed. I did communion, all that stuff. And my mom was really, really Catholic. She's not anymore though, so I'm very proud of her. But she was very Catholic at the time, and and I like Catholicism never really made sense to me. I did a lot of dissociating during church. I'm gonna be completely honest, and I'm really glad that I did, because I think if I was really fully absorbing like all the messages that they gave in church and everything, that like I'd be a different person today. But it's so interesting because I've always felt like that really deep connection to nature and like that interconnectedness to other people. And there was like a time in my life kind of where I got away from even like thinking about spirituality or religion or anything like that. It kind of just fell to the wayside. And then I had my child. I only have one child. I had him at in 2016, when I was 31, and um, that really kind of is like taking the rug out from underneath your feet, and it was like total dark night of the soul. And that's kind of like I went into like that dissolving phase and that mission, that mashing, that like churning and you know phase of transformation, that messy phase of transformation. And um, in 2020, it just became so clear that I needed to get divorced. Um, so I started that off. I started doing that, and then it was right around that time that I started being introduced to Lori's content, like on TikTok, um, and like I had been listening to her podcast for a while, and I started listening to her podcast. Um, and so I guess like even before that, there was like when Oscar was born, like I really started digging into like because I will admit in 2016 I was one of those people that was really shocked that Trump got voted president. So I was like, I need to understand this. What is going on? Like, holy shit! And I just had a baby. My baby was like 4 weeks old. So there was like reality. What I thought reality was just like opened wide open. So I it was just like, whoa, I need to reassess like what the hell is even reality. Um, and that's when I was introduced to Instagram for the first time in 2016. I got a phone, like a smartphone for the first time ever, introduced to Instagram, and it was just like my world opened. And I started learning from Black women. I started learning from Indigenous women, queer women, women of color, just like so many different kinds of women and trans folks and like people who had been pushed to the furthest margins of our society. And as I was listening to all of that, it's like I started tapping it because I have that clairsentience. So I started like tapping into that feeling space of those like spiritual lineages because Black feminism has a really strong spiritual lineage to it. And like so I could start to feel that, but I couldn't iterate what that was yet. And like hearing Indigenous people talk about their cultures and their philosophies, like that just like again, like it's just like, oh, this feels so right. And then so all of that kind of like built up to 2020 and me leaving my ex-husband and because that wasn't a good thing um, and uh, and listening to Lori's and deciding to go back to school to get my master's so I could practice counseling and listening to Lori talk about metaphysics is really like it opened the door for me and everything just kind of went from there. But it really, um, things started to click into place and make sense. And I'd been doing like ancestral connection too, like just like really intuitively, kind of like lighting candles and making an altar and like talking to ancestor kind of stuff, just intuitively from like listening and learning. But it was really like Lori who opened the door on all that. And then I got connected to like, there's so many other like metaphysicians in the awake space. And so through like that door that Lori opened, I was able to connect to like all these other people too and really expand my sense of spirituality. And then like most recently, I came to the works of like Abraham Hicks, like Esther and Jerry Hicks, and then that like really opened another door. So I don't know. I think that answered the question. Yeah, that's a really big question to answer.
Yeah, and it's not really an easy one too because it's one of those things that's so individual to everyone.
Yeah.
Because for me, and this is how I always explain it to people. Yes, I was very, very well churched. Yes, I still find myself going to churches, but I don't belong to a church. I'm not a
Yeah.
member of a religion. Uh, I really I really just like people.
Yeah.
I am someone
Yeah.
who is
Same.
truly a people person. I love
Same.
now
It's
here's the
fascinating.
thing. Eighth house, sun and moon. when I'm peopled out, I'm peopled out, and you better not be calling me on my phone when I'm people out.
Yes, I'm a people
Okay.
person as long as I get to choose when I do it.
Right. And
Yeah.
so I'm kind of like religion, but on my own terms,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And so, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I'm anti-religion. That
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean that I am trying to pit spirituality and religion against each other. In fact, they are kind of cut from the same cloth. They're both very Jupiterian concepts, and actually
Yeah.
explained that in I believe it was a Patreon post that I did, where I was like, "Look, spirituality, that's Pisces. Religion, that's Sagittarius. What do we notice about this? They're both they're both ruled by Jupiter. Well,
Yeah.
to some extent or another. And so like Neptune kind of has its little
Well, it's
tentacles in there as well for
it's the
spirituality. But
traditional
yeah,
ruler, right?
it has
So,
its little
yeah.
has its
Yeah.
little juju
It's
in
like
there.
Saturn. It's like
But
Saturn. Yeah.
right. And so that's kind of how I've always approached that. That's how I've always
Mhm.
told it to people, because yes, I will still like, as I'm telling you, when I did that episode where I went to um, the largest Pentecostal church in the state of Arkansas. In fact, it's a hub, I think, for a lot
Wow.
of the region. Like it's but it was always one of those churches I've always wanted to visit. Like from like since I was little, because I passed it on the side of the road. And I'm like, that is a gorgeous place. And my Capricorn Venus is just wanting to go inside so bad because the stained
Yeah.
glass is so pretty, the
Oh my
architecture is so
gosh.
gorgeous. Well, I
Yeah.
went in there and from a metaphysical perspective, and I'm like, look,
Cool. I mean, I don't know anything
that they
about.
actually encourage people in the Pentecostal church to have
Oh.
visions.
Oh, wow.
I had no idea. And I'm sitting
Cool.
here, I'm like, if I never had this experience, I would have never known.
Yeah.
And looky here, I made a bunch of friends that day, people who I still have contact information from. And I actually went back the next week and did an interview with one of them. I was just asking all these questions. Now,
Yeah.
obviously, there was a very big cultural difference
Mhm. Yeah.
because that's what religion kind of tends to do at times.
Yeah.
It can bring about some culture shocks in certain situations. But when you come at it from an open mind and you're coming at it from a place where you're just wanting to learn, the
Yeah.
boundaries kind of disappear, and that's kind of where you get into the true spirituality. What I experienced that day was me dissolving the boundaries of what I thought
Yeah.
religion was,
Yeah.
and I saw
Yeah.
it being expressed in a different way, and therefore
Yeah.
I was able to allow the spirituality in it to show as well. Does
Yeah.
that mean I'm Pentecostal? Absolutely not.
Yeah. Yeah.
But does that mean that I have a newfound respect?
Yeah.
I'll let you interpret that. So that's actually really great that that me and you actually have slightly similar stories with religion. Now, I wasn't Catholic, but I actually grew up
Fortunate.
very Methodist, Presbyterian, um, that kind of area of thought. However, the whole like confirmation thing, all of
Mhm.
that was something that I had to do as well. That was something that was
Wow.
taken
Yeah.
very seriously. And so when I did confirmation, it was literally just, hey, you're now a member of the church. And I
Hmm.
actually went back into my records because before I even knew I was going to be an astrologer, I was already writing down the dates and times where things were happening. I was already journaling and I was observing news cycles. I was observing all these stuff because part of my gut just felt like I'm going to need this someday.
With our
I'm like, I'm
intuition.
going to need this someday. And lo and behold,
Yeah.
here we are. And so I was actually going back through some of my little journal entries, and I went and I found the date where my confirmation happened, which was February 23rd. It was a Sunday of
Yeah.
2020. What do we know
Wow.
about that time? That was
Wow.
literally 3 weeks before Arkansas shut down for
Okay.
COVID.
Oh, yeah.
Well, when I look at that chart, it was also a chart of a new moon in my
Hmm.
11th house in Pisces, which
Ah.
rules baptism. And that was my first big connection where I was like, oh my God, religion and spirituality aren't actually separated from each other. Oh my God, they are, but they're not. They
Yeah.
are, but they're
Yeah.
not. How
Yeah.
do
It's like
I
a Venn
wrap my head around
diagram.
that?
Yeah.
Right. But like you can recognize that they're two different things, but yet the same thing. And it is so wild.
Yeah.
And that's spirituality for you. It's everything all encompassing.
Yeah.
Everything all encompassing. You can see spirituality in a chart. You can see religion in a chart. But you can also recognize that yes, it's everything all encompassing, but yet every single one also at the same time can maintain their own identities. And that
Yeah.
to me
Yeah.
is truly amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of like a lot what like healing and therapy is like too. It's like lots of times what therapy and healing is ultimately about is like different parts of yourself wanting different things, and there's like a part of ourself that we believe is bad because of our colonial indoctrination, and we try to make that part small, or we try to make it disappear or not exist. And so really, part of therapy is like getting all the parts of you to exist and embrace them all and love them all, and like create a safe space in your body for them all to exist so they can all come together and talk and hear each other. And then when you do that, like really amazing things happen. So
Oh,
it's not so
absolutely.
different. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's also kind of where nuance comes in, where you can
Yeah.
recognize that yeah, I don't know everything about everything, you know. There's also a place where I should be able to recognize that I just don't know and I just kind of have to accept the reality of a situation just by seeing what I
Yeah.
see, you know, and that's kind of also something that also has to play a role because if you're just sitting here trying to like master it all and be like, yeah, so spirituality this, religion that,
Yeah.
you're separating them to the point where you're kind of hyper separating them.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're separate, but they're also the same. And where you can recognize where one ends, one begins, and
Yeah.
then how all of it together creates the big picture. That's
Yeah.
truly magic. That's magic right there, if you ask me. Like that
Yeah.
is the magic of the universe or
Yeah.
God or whatever it is that that you call it. Call all
Yeah.
that is. That right there is to me the like true magic.
Yeah.
So, kind of to end us off here, is there anywhere that you would like to direct people who might be very interested in what you do or might just want to hear more about the thoughts that you might have, where the projects that you're working on, where can people find you at?
Yeah. So I'm on Instagram at the.neuroqueer.therapist, and I have a podcast called Age of Aquarius, and my website is neuroqueerwellness.com, and I'm putting together some really cool stuff. I'm putting together a 6 month coaching program that focuses on overcoming um, like fear of rejection, rejection wounds, rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Because, like, oh my gosh, so RSD is not an experience that I've gone through, and so many people who experience ADHD have that neurotype experience RSD, like rejection sensitive dysphoria in some way or another. But the way the rhetoric is on, it's like so damage based, like returning to what we were talking about, the damage based focus. Like it's so focused on damage and here's all the reasons you're sensitive to rejection and there's nothing you can do about it and all this stuff. And it's it's all like really focused on like dopamine and like the brain and how the brain works and how you're just kind of like stuck with this thing. But actually, like it's not something you have to be stuck with. Like it's really not. So I'm putting together a coaching program that really is focused on alignment and authenticity and connection, and it's going to have a group coaching element to it. It's called Unlock Your Inner Genius. So it's going to use some astrology. We're going to look at the birth chart to see where your genius and desire is at, and how to use that to overcome your fear of rejection. Of course, it's going to be somatics. I mean, there's going to be everything in it. I feel like, like Stefan from SNL, when I talk about this program,
Yes.
it's got astrology, it's got Wheel of Year, it's got the lunar cycles, it's got somatics, it's got everything.
It's got everything.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
actually really excited for that because I think that's going to be such a cool little program. I've never actually seen
yeah,
anything been done like that before, so that's actually truly groundbreaking. And I think who's better to do it than you? You know, like you got the experience,
yeah,
you got the
yeah,
charisma, and you also got the
You?
the will. And I think
Yes.
that's
Oh my
truly important.
gosh.
And you also
Such
have the
strong
passion
will.
there as well. So
Yeah.
I think people will really get a lot out of that. So with that being
Hmm.
said, thank you so much for coming on. This was a fantastic conversation, and we're gonna have to have you on again because this
All
was
right. Yeah.
truly amazing.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. This was so much
Yeah, of
fun.
course. Yeah, we'll have to chat. We'll have to chat on here again soon, some other time. But with that being said, thank y'all so much for joining us
Yeah.
this episode, and I'll see y'all tomorrow.